What's up, everybody? Sir Cedric here. I was just messing around with Buffre, Peff's new rack extension, and Urban Tech 2, 008's newest refill. And as you may or may not know, that's the follow-up to Urban Tech, which is probably one of my favorite synth refills of all time, next to the ones that I've made. And as soon as I opened up the refill, I already got some inspiration, already started a little beat. And then as soon as I opened Buffre after that, it just seemed like the perfect thing to put on top of this beat, and the perfect little idea to demonstrate some cool stuff that you can do in Urban Tech 2 and in Buffre. So I put Buffre on the master section after I'd already worked out the basic skeleton of the beat, and I hooked up an audio track to be live recording everything that I'm doing at the same time, so that if I found something that I liked and I couldn't necessarily replicate it later, I would still have sort of a hard copy of what I had done before that. Buffre has a ton of options, including the ability to pitch, randomize, switch between different run modes, different step lengths for the buffer, release, and gate times, and FX sends. It also has the length sweep of the buffer assigned to the pitch wheel, and some bit crushing assigned to the mod wheel. And with the settings in default mode, it's kind of like your standard beat repeater effect, and I really just want to play around with what happens when I first load Buffre into my master section and use it to affect my beat. So I'm going to try a little bit of a dry run with Buffre. At this point, I've only had it for about an hour. Before we do that, though, I want to listen to an unaffected version of the track. And while we do that, I'm going to scroll through the rack and show you some of the different elements from Urban Tech 2 that I'm using. Here's the dry track, starting with an intro. You can see that we start with one of the radio effects patches. So there's only 5 essential instruments that make up this beat. We have our intro instrument, which is the radio effects patch with an echo, and that echo is automated. We have our primary drum track, which is the UT Modeled Kong Kit number 2, and I've switched out a couple of the pads for some of the other pad patches that you'll find within the Urban Tech 2 folders. If you go a little deeper into each of the Kong kits, you can actually scroll through the different folders and change out all the pads, because 008 has done us the courtesy of saving each and every Kong patch into individual folders so that they're scrollable right from the gates. I've got a secondary percussion track here, UT Perk 2. I'm using a pulsar to modulate the pan on the channel strip. I've also used the saturation knob that Softtube has been kind enough to give us, and a pulverizer. I'm using one of the Urban Tech 2 pads that I've opened up and changed some of the settings internally, and most importantly here, I'm using the UT2 one-finger keyslinger number 15. I say most importantly because it's this one-finger patch that's actually generating the lead melody for our track. Each of these one-finger patches is a little different, but the main concept is you play your keys and it generates a melody based on the keys that you're playing. It's very similar in concept to a construction kit, except you get to kind of make your own melody, and each one of those patches is different. I am a refill maker as well. I program synths as well, and still to this day, this is one of the things that 008 does that consistently impresses me. I cannot stress enough how important this is in the creation of this beat. In fact, if I were to go into my arrange window and solo out this instrument, which I believe is combinator 3 here, you can hear just how important this is to making the whole loop. If I open up the MIDI track here, I'm actually only playing 4 different notes, one finger at a time, and I'm just following the basic chord progression that I laid down with the pad earlier in my song. All of the movement and motion is done with programming inside of the Thor, and then mixed in the mixer here and affected by the various effects that are on each patch. These patches are some of my absolute favorite synth patches, and you should definitely look into the Urban Tech 2 refill, if not just for these patches. So the next step is playing with Buffre on this beat. Since the first thing I heard with this beat was an opportunity to use Buffre for the first time, I think this will make a great little example track. It's very rhythmic and pretty simple in terms of construction and arrangement, and I just think this is a great example to show how powerful Reason is, based on the strengths of the given programmers and refill designers. 008 gave me this refill. I made a beat within 20 or 30 minutes. I played around with Buffre for about an hour, decided to throw it on the master section for this beat, and I think we can get some pretty great things to come out of the given devices. For the moment, I'm just going to experiment with the past run mode, like I said before, and you'll have to keep in mind that my experience with Buffre is relatively limited, and I'll be doing all of this live, so bear with me if I make any mistakes. I'm going to try my best to keep this in the realm of something that someone would actually want to hear. Well, dang, considering that was a live performance and I modulated a relatively small amount of controls, just the MIDI keyboard and the pitch and mod wheels, that actually turned out pretty good. And I actually heard some parts in there that I would use to embellish a beat. I probably wouldn't use that amount of modulation over the course of a song, but there's a few parts in there that I would definitely use. Now, the next thing I want to look at is some of the other controls on the front of Buffre and how we can use those. So I'm going to set up a little alternate track here, and we're going to look at the pitch, the release, the gate, and the start and length knobs for the gate, and how we can use those in conjunction with some other modulation like the length sweep and the bit crush, and come up with some pretty cool stuff that maybe we can also incorporate into our track. Alright, so it's pretty easy to throw in some tape stop and pitch up type effects, as well as get the gate going and start chopping things and use the release for kind of a scratchy feel to the whole thing. I even saw some parts in there that I'm thinking about resampling later and making a whole new beat out of and just scrapping them as ideas for this particular song. But I definitely see ways that we can use Buffre with the pitch control and the release to manipulate this beat some more. But I think I'm going to save the final stage of beat making, including resampling, to make the other beat for another video. And I want to look at another way we can use Buffre in this song to make something cool out of it. This time I'm going to use Buffre on the drums. So for the moment, I'm going to go ahead and bypass this Buffre on the Master Effects section here. And I'm going to go down to our drum track, which I've got the Urban Tech Modeled Kong number 2, and I've got no effects coming out of that so far, so I can just drop the Buffre right on top. And I'm also going to have to mute this audio track that we just created a moment ago from our little performance there. And we're going to right-click on Buffre and choose to go to the sequencer track. Since we've created it under the Kong, it automatically creates the MIDI track for us. And now all of our instrumentation is going to remain as it was, as well as our secondary percussion, and the Buffre will only apply to the drums. So let's take a try at this. Except this time, I think I'm going to turn triplets off and use current mode. So it's more of a traditional beat repeater that's oriented for drums. This way I just have to press the MIDI keys in anticipation of the hits rather than after the hits to get them into the Buffre. Again, it's not perfect, but I hear some great things that I could do with Buffre and this song, and considering how easy it was for me to make the beat and assign these parameters and manipulate them, I can see both of these things being great tools for the future. There you have it. That's the Urban Tech 2 and Buffre jam. That's my first experiment with Buffre and my first beat with Urban Tech 2. And now I think I'm going to move along to my second beat with Urban Tech 2 and also finalize the composition of this beat, but we're going to do that in the next video, which will be coming soon or eventually or whenever I feel like it. Peace!